Hi, I'm George Cooper, and I am the founder of the new DC chapter of We the Free. So, what is We the Free? This is the quote from their website. We the Free, or WTF, is the world's fastest growing animal rights and vegan street outreach organization. We specialize in highly innovative and impactful street advocacy events, digital advocacy campaigns, cutting-edge technology and training, and fostering a positive community. So yes, the acronym is WTF. Yes, it's provocative, and that's part of the fun. So as I mentioned, the DC chapter is new, and I hope everybody joins the Facebook group if you have a Facebook account. I hope we can get a better URL soon, but this is the URL for now. So what is street outreach? Street outreach is basically having face-to-face conversations with people in public spaces to convince non-vegans to become vegan and to convince vegans to get active. So We the Free specifically does this in two ways. We have two different kinds of events. We have Diamonds, where we draw the public in with openly displayed factory farming footage, and then Movie Challenges, where we invite the public to watch a short documentary to win a vegan treat. Okay, so why should you do this? Is this going to bring us any closer to a vegan world? Well, I'm a strong believer in having an ecosystem of activism. And I think that street outreach plays an important role in that ecosystem. I'd like to tell a little story about how I think street outreach might bring about a vegan world. So one way to think about how people change is that we're all social beings, right? And if we are going to adopt some sort of belief or value system that is a little different from the rest of our community, different people are going to have different amounts of tolerance for sort of standing out. In the literature, they call this a threshold of conformity. So if you are an innovator, basically, you have an idea of something that's different from the rest of your community. You're willing to stand out and be completely on your own, and you don't need anybody else to believe this in order to be willing to make this change. An early adopter is someone who needs some kind of community to exist. Even if it's like a small community or a fringe community, they're not going to be the very first, but they'll be pretty early on, they'll be early adopters. And then there are people who need the belief to be mainstream in order to adopt it. And then you have the holdouts who are pretty much not going to change no matter what. The beauty of street outreach is that we are targeting the people who are actually likely to change. Because when you are talking to people on the street, the people who are unlikely to change are probably just not going to stop. We can't force anybody to have a conversation, right? So the people who we talk to are the people who are likely to change. And this can be a real game changer if you have experience with talking to friends and family and you've had so much frustration with them. Remember, they are probably mainstream or holdout people. If you're going to be a vegan in today's world, you really have to be either an innovator or an early adopter. And realizing this was a big revelation for me because I had so much frustration with friends and family. And when I started doing street outreach, I think the words that came out of my mouth were, "This has restored my faith in humanity," because I realized that even if some of the people that I care about the most maybe have some barriers to changing, the world can change. And the beauty of focusing on the low-hanging fruit is that as I said, everybody has sort of different thresholds for how much of their community has to already believe something in order for them to be willing to change. If we start with the low-hanging fruit and the community gradually grows, then somebody with maybe a slightly higher threshold will have the community there that they'll be willing to join. And then somebody with a slightly higher threshold and a slightly higher threshold until the people who require it to be mainstream, it is mainstream, right? And then at that point, it can trigger what we call a cascade, where you get a rapid change in society that seems like it happened overnight. This is essentially what happened with attitudes toward same-sex marriage around 2010. Okay, so if you go to a We the Free event, like, what does your day look like? So we'll start off with a briefing where I'll go over the stuff that I'm saying today just a lot more briefly. And then we'll do the outreach, and so that'll be either in the form of a diamond or a movie challenge. And then we'll do a debriefing, talk about what happened, what went well, what could we do better. If you have any questions about, like, hey, somebody said this and I didn't know how to respond, like, we can work through that as a community. And then we'll have some social time afterwards, maybe go out to a restaurant or something. So what should you wear? It'd be really great if you go to the We the Free store and get some branded clothing. We certainly don't require this, but it's very nice if you can. If not, then maybe dark blue would be great. But we're not going to turn people away. We do ask that you not wear any animal-derived clothing, and I'm certainly understanding of, like, if you had something like from before you were vegan or something like that, I don't care. But unfortunately, the public will find any excuse to brand you as a hypocrite. And this is one way that you can avoid that. And also avoid wearing clothing with vegan messages. This is not really so important for diamonds, but I'll talk about the movie challenges a little bit later, where we want to not be upfront about what the video is about in order to get people curious about what it is. All right, so what is a diamond? When we do a diamond, we have two teams. There's the diamond team that holds televisions with a harness, so it's not strenuous, but the TVs basically show farmed animal exploitation footage from Dominion. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the documentary, but it is pretty gruesome in that that does draw people in. The people holding the televisions wear colorful masks, which makes sure that people are looking at the televisions rather than people's faces. The name comes from the formation that the people in the diamond team stand in. They stand in a diamond formation. We only have two TVs right now, so the diamonds might be a little flat, but that might change in the future. And so the outreach team connects with passersby to persuade non-vegans to go vegan and vegans to get active. And I'll talk a lot more about the best way to do that later on. We want to make sure people don't get tired, and so we will ask people to switch roles throughout the evening. So this is what the diamond team looks like. You can see the masks. These are paper origami masks, and maybe we'll have a party to make these. You can see they're standing in the diamond formation, holding the televisions. So what should the diamond team do? Basically, the diamond team's job is to be a statue. So remain still, don't speak, don't make eye contact. But there are three circumstances where you should raise your hand. One, if you need a break, and maybe we can switch somebody out. Two, if an interested passerby has not yet been approached by an outreacher, make sure that an outreacher does speak with them. And also, if a child passes by, that's anybody who looks 12 or under, we want to make sure to get parental permission if they're going to look at this footage. So try and maybe cover it up a little if you can, or turn away and get an outreacher's attention. Here's what outreach looks like. So here are some guidelines for the outreachers. So avoid having social conversations with other volunteers. This is why we have the social time afterwards, because we know, maybe you haven't seen each other in a little while and you have a lot to catch up on. But, it doesn't look professional if we're having a lot of chit chat. And perhaps more importantly, we don't want people to get distracted and miss somebody who maybe we could outreach to. Keep outreach conversations to one outreacher per group, just to be efficient. Don't interrupt or take over conversations. I know this can be frustrating for a lot of people when it happens. You spend some time building up a rapport, and then you feel like you are giving all that up, and it's just very jarring. Also, especially if we're in Columbia Heights, but honestly anywhere, we are likely to run into people who maybe don't speak English. And so if anybody else on the team does speak that language, it's good to know that. And so we can direct them to someone who is able to talk to them. I know personally enough Spanish for an outreach conversation, not exactly fluent, but it'll do. Don't feed the trolls. So there are going to be some people on the street who are not interested in having an honest conversation. And we have a limited number of outreachers and a limited amount of time. If you feel like they're just there to waste your time, just find a polite way of moving on. Ask for nothing less than veganism. So the Vegan Society's definition of veganism says basically a vegan is someone who's against animal exploitation and therefore avoids animal products to the extent possible and practicable. And I'll leave it up to you to interpret what possible and practicable means for any given person. But by that definition, everybody on Earth can be vegan. As I said before, ask for parental consent if a child wants to watch the video. And at the end of the conversation, give your conversation partner an outreach card. This is what the outreach cards look like. So we have two kinds. One for non-vegans to try and get them to be vegan. One for vegans to try and get them to be active. I'm still working on the design for the vegan one, but you'll see that the non-vegan card points people to 3movies.wtf, and there's a code. I'll talk about both of these things a little bit later. So the other style of event that we have is the movie challenge. So the way a movie challenge works is we set up tables with several screens on them facing away from the public. So this is unlike a diamond where we want everybody to watch the footage right away. For this, we're asking people to actively choose to participate in the challenge. So again, we have two roles in this kind of event. We have ushers and outreachers. The ushers challenge the public to watch a 3.5-minute vegan documentary with headphones so they can actually have audio with their experience, unlike with Diamond. If they agree to participate in the challenge, we will give them a vegan treat. And then once they watch the video, the outreachers have a conversation with the participant to convince them to go vegan. And so here's a picture of what that looks like. You can see bags of treats on the table and the screens, and there's a banner on the front of the table talking about what the challenge is. So does anybody want to volunteer to play the role of the participant in the challenge? This isn't hard, I promise. Anybody? All right. So we'll start off just by reading this script. So I'm going to ask you, would you like to take the challenge and win a prize?
What's the challenge?
if you watch a 3-minute movie, you can select one of the prizes on the table and it's completely free.
What kind of movie?
That's part of the challenge. It is only 3 minutes long and you can stop at any time. Okay, you can sit down for a little while, but I'm going to call you back. Actually, I'm going to call you back now. Never mind. So, all right, let's pretend that this is the table that has the screens on it. I guess it does have one screen on it already. So we're going to call this the entrance side. So there's going to be a long line of people waiting to take this challenge, and you're going to wait in that line. So can you just walk over to this side? I'm going to assume you're not a child, but if you were a child, I'd make sure to get parental consent. And all right, so everybody in line has had their chance, and now it's your turn. So you can walk over to the table, and there will be headphones, and I'll tell you, hey, put on these headphones. And I'll tell you, you can stop the video at any time, and then we will play the video. So there are actually a couple different kinds of videos. Yeah, go ahead.
So since like the child watches the child video, we still have to get consent for the child to watch like the kid video, or?
Yeah. We'll play it for the parent first, so they know what it is that they're watching. But as you pointed out, we have a couple different kinds of videos. I think the three that are going to be relevant are the general audience one, the one that's geared toward vegetarians, and the one for children. I'm going to try and see if I can get one in Spanish, because I think that's going to be pretty important. All right, can you play the video? So I want everybody to watch the video that the challenge participants will be watching. If you've seen enough factory farm footage in your life and you want to step out for the next 4 minutes, I understand, but I think it is important to know what it is that the participants are responding to. All right.
Is this the child one?
No, this is the regular one.
Your kids will love McDonald's Happy Meal.
One thing that unites us as humans is food. And one thing that's common amongst almost all our cultures is the use of animals in food. Supermarket packaging and marketing campaigns may lead us to believe these animals live happy lives. But is this actually the case? In the pig industry, piglets who are born too small or weak are considered to have no economic value. Many are just left to die. Others are killed by being smashed against the floor. Those who survive have their tails docked, teeth clipped, and testicles ripped out with no pain relief. During and after they give birth, mother pigs are often confined in crates so small they can't even turn around. Since only female chickens lay eggs, male chicks in the egg industry are considered useless and are killed on their first day of life. Most often, they are macerated alive. Chickens in the meat industry are selectively bred to grow extremely big, extremely fast. As a result, they often experience problems walking, standing, and even breathing. Cows in the dairy industry are relentlessly milked, which can cause them to collapse from exhaustion. Out of all the animals we use for food, fish are the animals we kill in the largest numbers. Yet, they're the ones we protect the least from cruelty and suffering. Investigations have often found fish still conscious long after being put on ice. Whether they're raised for meat, dairy, or eggs, all animals are eventually sent to a slaughterhouse. Many are killed by being hung upside down and having their throats slit. For pigs, a common slaughter method is the carbon dioxide gas chamber, which burns their eyes, nostrils, sinuses, throats, and lungs while suffocating them.
So, yeah, I know that's it's a lot for anybody to watch, and after that, the person taking the challenge is inevitably going to be, hopefully shocked, and they're going to have some questions, and the outreacher is then going to have some questions for them. Okay. So do you want to resume your role as the challenge participant? You were wearing headphones. You can take them off. And this was the entrance side, so we'll call this the exit side. So I'll lead you away from the table, and I will introduce you to an outreacher. So I guess I'll be an outreacher now. I will have a conversation with you, try to persuade you to be vegan or get active, as the case may be, and then you'll get a treat. So thank you for thank you for being the participant today. We try to be sanitary. So if you're an usher, we'll clean the headphones in between participants. So one unique aspect of the work that We the Free does is that we have tools for actually measuring your impact. After people leave the conversation, we guide them to a site where they can learn more, and you can track that with a tool called MyStats. So the site that we direct people to is called 3movies.wtf. And the 3 movies that the URL refers to are Dominion, The Game Changers, and Seaspiracy. And of course, they can watch any of those, but also do lots of other things. It really is a one-stop shop for anything they might want to know. And so they can connect with mentors, they can take a pledge to go vegan, they can learn about nutrition, all sorts of things. So the first time they go to the site, it prompts them for a code. So it looks like this. As you saw, the outreach cards have codes written on them. So they'll enter the code. And they do their thing. They watch the documentaries. They make a pledge saying, I'm going to go vegan. All of that is recorded on a site called mystats.wtf. So the codes that are written on the card, they could either be for the group, and we'll have plenty of cards with the group code written on them, or if you want to track your own personal impact, you can create your own code and write that on your cards. So if you do want to create your own card, basically just go to mystats.wtf, create an account, type a code, make sure the organization is set to We the Free and the team is the Washington, D.C. team, and click Create Code. Okay, so the most important thing that I haven't talked about is how do you have this outreach conversation? I think before talking about how to have the conversation, it's important to understand the psychological reasons why this kind of change is difficult for a lot of people. So it's really important when we're talking about beliefs or values that there are really two very different kinds. So there are basically tribal beliefs and simple beliefs. So a tribal belief is something that is connected to your identity in some way. So these are things like religion or partisan political views. Tribal beliefs can serve a lot of purposes. For a lot of people, they provide a sense of community, meaning, purpose. And that's why tribal beliefs are a lot more difficult to change than simple facts. And an important reason for this is that, again, we're all social beings, and evolutionarily, we evolved in tribes that supported every aspect of our life. In our modern society, it's pretty easy to be maybe a little bit of a loner and you'll be just fine. But 100,000 years ago, if you were rejected by your tribe, you were dead. And our brains don't evolve that fast. So that's essentially the mindset that we as humans are still living with, even if it's maybe a little bit outdated. And so I want to convince you that eating animals is very much or it being okay to eat animals is very much a tribal belief. So a couple ways to think about it. When you think about culture, what do you think about? You think about things like, you might think about language, you might think about art, but for most people, food is at the top of the list, right? And you think about, your grandmother. She might share with you her meatball recipe that has been passed down through the generations, that she's perfected. And when she shares that with you, it is an act of love. For a lot of people, if you are rejecting that food, it can feel like you're effectively rejecting your grandmother's love. Outside of that, I'm sure we've all experienced, there can be some social tensions with being vegan. It's easy, if you're not yet vegan, to make these out to be bigger than they are, but certainly there can be cases where you feel like, I'm sort of asking people to maybe go to a different restaurant than they want to, and there can be tensions. I think another thing that a lot of people don't really think about is that if you accept veganism, what you're accepting is that you and your tribe do immoral things. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to accept. This doesn't apply necessarily to everybody, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of ads on TV that make meat out to be this very masculine thing. And for a lot of men, masculinity is a big part of their identity. And if they feel like that's threatening, if that is being threatened, then that can be a scary thing for them. Another thing a lot of people don't really think about, so as we're outreaching, I know a lot of people will say, if let's say somebody says, oh, well, veganism is expensive, you might say, well, in the poorest parts of the world, they have more plant-based diets. And that's true, but that gets at something a little deeper, which is that for a lot of people, the ability to put meat on the plate for every meal is sort of a sign you've made it, right? Especially if somebody, maybe grew up poor or grew up in one of those societies where they couldn't afford meat. And so for them, they associate meat with luxury and economic security. And if you are telling them not to eat meat anymore, it can feel like a threat to their status. So just to sort of drive this point home about how different tribal beliefs are from simple beliefs, there was an experiment where they put subjects in an MRI and they scanned their brains. And while they were in the MRI, they had them read some kind of argument against something that they already believed. So either this was a tribal belief, like they were challenging their views on abortion, or it was a simple belief, like challenging their belief about who invented the light bulb or something like that. So for the neutral topics, like they didn't see much on the MRI. If you challenge them on a tribal belief, on the other hand, you see a fight or flight response. So the adrenaline is pumping, like your blood is flowing away from the vital organs so that you can run or fight if you need to. Like they have seen a saber-toothed tiger. And in the brain, you see the regions activated that are associated with what's called the default mode network. And so that is connected with the relationship between self and others. In other words, what's being activated in their brain is their sense of identity. So people naturally have a lot of empathy toward animals, right? Most people do anyway, and yet most people still eat meat. So what is it that allows them to not think about their natural empathy toward animals as they're eating meat? The psychologist Melanie Joy refers to several different techniques that she groups under the name psychic numbing. So there's a couple of these. There's denial and avoidance. So basically, you don't have to think about it because all the animal farms and slaughterhouses are, in remote areas and behind closed doors. There's justification. We've heard a lot of these justifications before, but she basically breaks them down into eating animals being normal, natural, and necessary. There's objectification, which is basically when we're talking about a piece of meat, we have oftentimes like different words. Like we'll refer to a piece of beef rather than a cow. And of course, the law treats animals as property. And then there is also de-individualization. So you don't think about an individual chicken. You think of like a mass of chickens, right? And it's possible to do this because the vast majority of people never like individually get to know any of the animals that end up as meat on their plate. Dichotomization. So humans are very good at breaking down the world into categories. So a very convenient category for psychic numbing is categorizing different species into either food animals or non-food animals. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, dissociation. Basically, just emotionally disconnect. And don't let yourself feel those feelings. So when I was a little kid, I didn't want to go to bed. And when my parents tried to make me, I would shout and bang my fists and like do whatever I could not to lay my head down on the pillow. And looking back at that, I realized that as a kid, you don't have a lot of autonomy or freedom, right? Your parents basically control your life. And so when you feel like what little freedom you do have is being threatened, you can have a pretty strong emotional reaction to that. And you do what you can to sort of try and reassert that freedom. So psychologists call this kind of reaction reactance. And it turns out not everybody outgrows it. And for a lot of people, if you are telling them not to eat meat, it can feel like you're taking away their freedom. And they can respond in a pretty similar way. You might hear something like, "You can't tell me not to eat meat. I'm going to eat twice as much meat now." All right, so what if somebody does push past these barriers and they actually change one of these deeply felt tribal beliefs? So the process basically looks like this. They'll gradually accumulate more and more evidence that they can't support their current belief. And initially they'll just ignore it. Like it's pretty easy, right? Like if there's not very much of it, it might as well not exist. But at a certain point, they might start feeling a little bit uneasy. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the term cognitive dissonance, which is just feeling uncomfortable because you feel like your behavior might not be consistent with your values. The initial response to cognitive dissonance usually is to assimilate that information, which is basically saying to yourself, no, my worldview really is correct, but you find some way of like rationalizing that worldview actually being consistent with the evidence. But at a certain point, it gets to be too much. This is called the affective tipping point. And once it gets to be too much, then you have to accommodate the information or actually change your worldview. So what does this look like for veganism? I'm using my name, but this is not exactly my story. But let's say George sees a PETA billboard. He doesn't think too much about it. Everybody he knows eats meat, so he can just ignore it. But at a certain point, let's say he watches a YouTube video about what happens to farm chickens. And he starts feeling kind of uncomfortable. He values being kind to animals, but he still eats meat. So what does he do? Assimilation. George rationalizes he's still a good person because, you know, he only buys humanely raised meat, right? But at a certain point, let's say he has a conversation with a We the Free activist who challenges all of his rationalizations. Maybe he reaches an effective tipping point, at which point he will be forced to accommodate and actually go vegan. All right, so how do you make this happen? I think one of the more useful frameworks for thinking about these kinds of strategies is Lasswell's model of communication, which basically breaks down modes of persuasion according to who, what, to whom, and in which channel. And over the years, there have been a variety of studies that have looked into what makes effective persuasion according to each of these different categories. So, who? An effective persuader is an expert. Now, I would encourage you to learn as much as you can. You're never going to learn everything. Like, there's always going to be something new that comes up, and that's okay. You know, that happens to all of us. But I will provide some resources later on in this presentation so that you can learn a little bit more. I wouldn't recommend like overloading people with facts, but if somebody asks a question, it is always helpful for your credibility if you have a confident and correct answer. An effective persuader is honest and trustworthy. So never lie, never stretch the truth. The facts are on our side. And if you get caught in a lie, that is much worse for your reputation than if you just say, I don't know. An effective persuader shares identities with the listener. So there are various ways that you can convey that you share these identities, or look for identities that you share. So for most of us, maybe not quite all of us, but for most of us, we were at some point omnivores. And if that was the case for you, then you can say, I understand that. Like that's how I used to feel in order to connect with them. Like, you're not some alien. And a couple other ways you can do it. So like a common thing that might come up is somebody might talk about the role of animal products in their culture. So maybe you have come from the same cultural background, or there's some overlap there. That's another good opportunity to look for commonalities. Okay, so what? So an effective message does a couple things. So where appropriate, it can be helpful to anticipate counterarguments. So this can make it clear that, like, this is something I've already thought about. You're not teaching me anything new. I've really thought about all the different aspects of this. More importantly, though, I would say it's helpful to make sure that the way that you frame the message aligns with the listener's existing values. It's really hard to change somebody's like more fundamental worldviews. Like, you know, you're not going to change somebody's whole view on religion in order to convince them to be vegan. You want, to the extent possible, to try to frame your message in a way that's consistent with the way that they already look at the world. So I'm actually going to give an example from the other side of how to do this effectively. So in Denver, last year, there was a ballot initiative, two ballot initiatives actually, to ban slaughterhouses and to ban fur. And the opponents of this ballot initiative framed the ballot initiatives as being attacks on minorities. And because the residents of Denver, by and large, are liberal, protecting minorities is one of their values. And so this line of attack was very effective. I would say that if you want to look for tips on effective messaging, look at the most evil corporations that you can find, whether it's you know, big meat or big oil or big tobacco. They can hire the best psychologists and advertisers who really know what they're doing in this area. So how can you do this as a vegan? Of course, this is going to depend on who you're talking to, but let's say you're talking to somebody who's a little bit more conservative. You know, what are some things that conservatives value? So one thing they might value is something like taking personal responsibility for your actions, not expecting the government to step in and do things for you. Well, that's exactly what veganism is, right? Is taking personal responsibility. So you can just make sure that the framework that you're having this conversation in is a framework that they're already familiar with. Okay, so to whom? An effective message is tailored to the listener. So it's expressed in simple terms that are relevant to the listener's life. It can be tempting oftentimes to provide a lot of unnecessary details, but keeping it simple can help to keep the conversation from getting derailed. And most importantly, use the Socratic method. So the Socratic method is basically just asking questions rather than telling people what they should think. Why does this work especially well for vegan street outreach? So there's a quote from Blaise Pascal, the famous French mathematician, that I think expresses it pretty well. People are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they have themselves discovered than by those which have come into the mind of others. In other words, if you tell people what to believe, then they feel like you're trying to control them. You know, they might have that reaction that I talked about, where they feel like you're trying to inhibit their autonomy. But if you are just asking questions, it can feel like they're really coming up with it themselves, which is a much more effective way of getting people to change. And it works especially well for vegan outreach because most people already believe that animals shouldn't be abused or exploited. They just have, you know, maybe some excuses in their head, but these excuses are usually pretty flimsy, and it's not that hard, even without like external information. It's not all that hard usually to get people to reflect on those beliefs and realize that they're not consistent or logical. Another useful way of thinking about this is that you never want to debate. And this is important because in a debate, there's a winner and there's a loser. And how do you lose? You lose by conceding to the other side, right? And so nobody concedes, and therefore change doesn't happen. By using the Socratic method, you're avoiding the debate frame, and you can get people to think of it more as like a process of working together to discover something rather than an adversarial process. Okay, so finally, in which channel? So an effective message is tailored to the medium in which it's delivered and is ideally delivered in person. So some of you might have experience with doing this kind of work online, and it can be kind of hard. In person is a lot better. So that's why it's so wonderful that that is exactly what We the Free does. Okay, so deep canvassing. This is a technique that I think is really important to learn about because it's so well studied. So basically it's a technique for political canvassing that centers non-judgmental listening and story sharing. So it was developed by LGBT activists after Prop 8 passed. So Prop 8 was a ballot initiative in California to ban same-sex marriage. And this was devastating for the activists, and they really wanted to figure out how they could turn the tide. So they developed this technique, and it's been studied over the years, and it is infinitely superior to any of the other techniques that have been traditionally used for political persuasion. Think of things like TV ads or mailers or things like that. Specifically, it is 102 times more effective when measured for convincing people to vote for Biden compared to the other techniques. And not only that, but something like a TV ad might change minds in the short term, then people forget about it and they sort of revert back to their previous beliefs. With deep canvassing, those attitude changes actually lasted. Okay, so how does deep canvassing work? So basically, there's 3 elements: establish rapport, share your story, and encourage others to share their story. And that's in order of what you should spend the least time on versus what you should spend the most time on. So how do you establish rapport? There are a couple aspects of this that are important. One, make it clear that you don't intend to shame. You can actually explicitly say this. It's fine. I'm not here to shame. You can say that. Also, listen attentively. Don't interrupt. Repeat what they say in your own words, and find common ground. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these later. But again, after that, share your story. Encourage others to share their story. Ask them how they came to their beliefs, and that's what you should spend most of your time on. So how does this work for veganism? Sharing your story can happen a couple different ways. You can talk about what happens to the animals. You definitely will. That's why the video is there. But you can also share your story of why you decided to go vegan. The beautiful thing about sharing your own story is that people can't challenge that. It is your story. And so again, this is escaping the debate frame. And then there are a couple of ways you can encourage other people to share their story. So some that I use are have you thought about being vegan before? Do you have any friends or family who are vegan? Do you have a pet? And get them to talk about, think about how they think about their pet as an individual who has a personality and thoughts and feelings. By the way, I actually recommend using the term pet rather than companion animal because you don't want to overload people with terminology that they're not already familiar with. Okay, so with every response, I encourage you to do these 4 things. We talked about some of them before. You don't necessarily have to do all of them, but I would generally encourage you to do them in this order. So first, repeat back what the person said in your own words. So there's 2 advantages to doing this. One, it proves that you are listening, because if you weren't listening, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? 2, if you misunderstood what they said, then they can correct you, and you can make sure that you're on the same page. 2, find common ground, and I'll give some examples of how to do this. 3, ask a question to challenge their point. So this is where the Socratic method comes in. And sort of almost as a last resort, inform them of anything they can't figure out. So what you want to prioritize is leading them to the conclusion first with questions. And if they just need additional information, you can provide that sort of at the end. But that should be the last thing you do. Okay, so let's give an example of how this might work in practice in an outreach conversation. Let's say somebody says, I lost my job a few weeks ago, and with all this inflation, it can be tough to get food on the table as it is. I'm not sure I could be vegan because veganism is really expensive. All right, first thing you want to do, repeat back what they said. You might say something like, the stress of budgeting for food must be really tough, on top of the stress of not knowing when you'll get another job. Common ground. You could say something, this will obviously be different depending on what they said, but maybe you could say something like, I was laid off last year and I remember how hard it was. So now the question, are there any kinds of foods you worry might be more expensive? I actually really like this question, by the way, because 80% of the time, people don't have an answer for it. And they realize that it's just something that they've heard. But let's say they have the right answer. The fake meats and cheeses and stuff definitely cost more. You could say something like, do you think you need to eat those products to have a healthy vegan diet? They might say, I guess not, but what should I eat instead? So at this point, you can go ahead and answer their question. You don't always have to answer their questions with a question. So you might inform them that foods like tofu, beans, and lentils are all delicious, healthy, and inexpensive sources of vegan protein. So just a few questions that I personally find helpful to include in every conversation that I have. So you need a starting question. How does this footage make you feel is a good one. You want to connect with people's emotions. I also ask them if they eat milk, dairy, or eggs, because sometimes you're already talking to a vegan or a vegetarian, and it's important to make sure that you're tailoring the conversation to the person that you're talking to. You can ask them, are you familiar with veganism? Because you're asking people to go vegan, so they should know what it is that you're asking. And some people don't even know what the word vegan means, or they might have a strange idea of what it means, and so it's important to clarify that. You might then ask, is there anything that you think might get in the way of you being vegan? So this is where you will go through all the various objections and get them to realize that all their excuses are really terrible. And then after all that, I think it's really important to be explicit about what you are asking for. You are asking for them to be vegan. And I know in a lot of outreach, it seems obvious, but in a lot of outreach conversations, it's very easy to forget this. So just always ask, knowing what you now know, will you go vegan? Okay, so I mentioned before that it is helpful to be an expert. So here's some resources that you can use to learn what you need to know. There's a couple of different categories of things that are important. It's important to know what the impacts are of animal agriculture. So this would be like, what happens to the animals? Like, what are the impacts on the environment? What are the impacts for public health? What are the impacts for personal health? All those kinds of things. So I do recommend watching Dominion. I know it's hard to watch, but it's free and it's very informative. I also recommend Ed Winter's book, This is Vegan Propaganda, which goes over all those different areas that I talked about. Responding to objections, I think, is an important thing to be ready for because you're going to spend a lot of time doing this in your outreach conversations. So if you want a book-length treatment of this, you can read, again, by Ed Winters, How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. But if you want something shorter and free, We the Free does provide a PDF called How to Handle Common Objections. And that is actually a list of questions to respond to each of these objections. And again, questions are what you should be using. And finally, you should understand how to persuade effectively. And for that, I recommend How Minds Change by David McRaney, which is not a vegan book at all, but it is just about persuasion. And I think it's a really awesome book, and a lot of this presentation came from that book. Okay, so let's do a little practice. So I call this Vegan Jeopardy because you should be answering in the form of a question, since this is the Socratic method. But actually, what I'd really like to do is start with common ground, because I think that is something that you can do with pretty much anything you say. Common ground and then a question. So let's say somebody says, well, I agree that what happens to animals is bad, but I'm just one person, and the scale of factory farming is so big, so what I do is not going to make any difference. So can anybody think of like how they might find common ground with that person? Yeah.
Oh, how they might find common ground. Well, I mean, I guess you can say that it seems easily to, like it's just like, you can basically ask them if they vote as well in elections.
Yeah.
And if they do vote, then, I mean, and you vote, of course, as well, then you have common ground as you're doing a measly thing that probably, there's on the scale of not making a difference, as they would say.
Yeah.
I guess you could also mention like about saving, animals on an individual level.
Yes.
Or supply and demand even.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For me personally, I always go right to the seeing animals on an individual level because, it can seem like you're up against this impossibly large system. But if you realize that your decision impacts specific animals, then it's no longer about the system. It's about whether you are going to cause that to happen to these animals. So that's great. All right, so what if somebody says, I'm already a vegetarian, isn't that enough? Any thoughts on, yeah?
I would say I used to think that being vegetarian was also enough.
Good common ground.
It doesn't hurt the animals to drink milk, is what I thought, but then I learned. But do you know about what happens in the dairy and egg industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and at a certain point you can get to the informing stage and talk about that. Yeah, that's great.
I
Yeah.
always ask them why they went vegetarian.
Yes.
And make them
Yes.
say to me that they care about animals. It kind of like makes them say it out loud.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I agree wholeheartedly because, again, once you get them to be explicit about what their values are, you can frame the change that you want them to make in terms of those values. All right, maybe this is a little easier. So what if somebody says, we should eat meat because it's natural and we're part of the food chain? A person eating a chicken is just like a lion eating a gazelle. Anybody want to take this one? All right.
I agree that humans did eat meat as we evolved to how we are now throughout history, but I don't think it's still necessary because we have the ability to eat other things, unlike lions. And do you think that because lions eat their own babies in the wild that we should also do that?
Yeah. So this maybe gets a little into the question of how much we should soften what we say. There's not one answer to this because different approaches are going to work for different people, right? But if you feel like, by the time you're getting to objections, you can probably get a sense of who they are. But if you feel like you want to soften it a little bit, maybe you could say something a little bit more abstract, like, do you think that we should always model our own behavior as people based on what we see in the animal kingdom? Did you want to say something?
I guess another response is an underlying value I'm seeing in what they're saying. If you want to read between the lines, is like a tendency towards what's natural and what's happening in the animal kingdom.
Right.
And so there I might say something like, I see you have a value, or you seem to have a value of, adhering to what nature naturally does.
Yeah.
Is that right? Get their confirmation.
Yeah.
And if they say yes, they're like, what do you think about factory farming and confining animals to the millions in these terrible conditions, and the conditions that I would say are terrible? Does that seem natural to you?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's still a little bit of a gotcha.
Right, yeah.
I want to go with gotchas.
Right. But you are framing it in terms of their existing values, which is important. Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to say also, if you don't think you can like find common ground easily, almost all of these, maybe some of them, maybe not, but like almost all of them, you can always say like, I used to think that too.
Yeah.
Right before.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. There are a couple different ways to do this one. So how about, well, how do you know plants don't feel pain?
All right, you can attack this one on two levels. First of all, the animals that we are raising to slaughter and eat have to eat plants in the first place. So by raising those animals, right, if you believe that plants feel pain, that means you're contributing to more plant death in the first place. And then on a more reasonable level, plants do not have brains or nervous systems, so therefore they are incapable of feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you think that you could express those ideas as questions?
No, you're right. What do you think the animals that we raise to slaughter eat?
Oh, great start. Yeah.
Well, but you have to start with, I used to think that.
Yeah. Common ground. Common ground.
Fair enough. And then I guess
Yeah.
why do you think that that plants feel pain?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, from my common ground, I would say I think that you have an interest in how we don't know a lot. We don't know everything about how plant biology works, but as a biology student, I can tell you that plants do not have a nervous system, so as far as we know, they don't feel pain. And do you think that animals feel pain? Because we're talking about animals.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
I've actually heard a really fascinating answer to this from Eloisa Trinidad from Chili's on Wheels, if any of you know her. And she talks about, she really flips the answer on its head here, where she says, she takes a very spiritual approach, and she says, how do we know that plants don't feel pain? Perhaps they do, and we're all part of this planet. We're all part of nature. Who are we to say that plants don't feel pain? But that being said, going back to what I was sharing earlier, there's a foundation to why we want to move away from harming animals.
Yes, I think there's, this is one of those cases where you can sort of make an even if argument. Like,
yes.
Even if plants did feel pain, you should still be vegan. And I think in cases where you can make this kind of even if argument, you should start with the even if part. So, yeah.
This feels like a question that's like feeding the trolls, though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's a valid question because, there are things that plants do. Some plants can react to external stimuli. It's just that they don't have anything like animals. We can tell we feel pain because they have a nervous system. Plants don't have that, so even though they can react, some of them can react to external stimuli, it doesn't mean that they feel pain the way that animals do. So I think it's better, even if it's it is a troll question, but it is kind of an interesting question. I feel like if we just ignore it, then they'll be well, they can't answer this question. Just answer it honestly.
Yeah, and getting back to the troll point also, I think I wouldn't be too trigger happy in terms of dismissing people as trolls because there's a risk there too, that you're just gonna end all the conversations you have, right? If it's clear that this is all the kind of questions you're getting, they're just trying to get a rise out of you, then yeah, they're a troll. But one or two of these, continue the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that some of these questions, to me, may trigger a interpretation as a person feeling defensive. And so, I think that's a really good point, Dev. And so I feel like if somebody is feeling defensive, it's probably, tell me what you think of this, George, it's probably a good cue to go back to one of the earlier steps of, establishing rapport and common ground first.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
What would you do if somebody just starts accusing you of what would you do if someone just tries to derail the conversation and starts saying stuff well, I just don't care about animals. I met people that generally don't care. They're just yeah, I know this is bad, but I still eat it because I like meat, and it's fine.
Right.
And then when I pushed back and I tried to use these kind of strategies, I actually ended a friendship recently because I tried to use strategies, and then they just started attacking me and my relationship. and saying I'm a bad person. I was like, okay, bye. But
Yeah.
what do you do like if you're talking to like a random person and they
Yeah.
start going after you?
Yeah, again, this gets back to the beauty of talking to strangers. You don't have to worry about your emotional connection with them. And yeah, again, if you feel like they just want to be a troll, end the conversation. But if you feel like you're just getting, it's still mostly a good conversation, but you know, you're getting some of these stupid, weird, defensive questions. So in terms of the I don't care argument, you could even find common ground, actually. You could say something like, you know, I definitely am aware that there is a lot of suffering in this world. And, you know, it's impossible for me to get emotionally invested in every single instance of suffering because there is so much of it, right? But one thing that does make this a little different is that this is a case where we are deciding whether we are going to cause that suffering or not, right? And you might say, well, think of somebody who intentionally harms another person, right? Let's say they like kick a homeless person on the street, right? And would we accept the defense that they just don't care, right? Could we feel like it's still a bad thing for them to cause that harm, even if they don't have a feeling that it's something that they should do, even if they just intellectually recognize that that's something they should avoid doing? That's usually how I approach it.
That was really good.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if someone like tells you that they don't care and you actually, you know, are tempted to assume that they actually don't care, then it's maybe good to ask them why they're even talking to you, because they would have just walked by if they actually didn't care at all.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't tried that. So this is all the this is it for my presentation. But if anybody has any other questions, or yeah.
Can you explain why you wear the mask?
Sure. Basically, we want people to be, I mean, there's two reasons. One, it's intriguing. Like, it's a way of drawing people in. Like, why are people wearing these weird masks? And then two, you know, the people wearing the masks are the people who are holding TVs. And so, you know, people are drawn to looking at faces, right? If the people holding the TVs can play the role of a statue more rather than people, then they're more likely to look at the footage.
On the slide, the second slide of the diamond, where it talked about the outreach role,
Right.
second bullet, it said one outreach person per group.
Right.
Did that mean group of participants or diamond group?
Yeah, so one group of passersby.
Passersby.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's most of the time you want it to be one-on-one conversations, but occasionally people will walk by. You know, there's a couple that's walking together or something. Like you can talk to that couple as a group. Groups might sometimes get a little bit too big, and then you can try and split them up and have, you know, one outreacher talk to one part of the group, one outreacher talk to another part of the group. But it's a little bit wasteful, especially if we don't have a ton of outreachers, to have like two outreachers talking to the same person.
Also, the diamond, you know, of course, very similar to Anonymous for the Voiceless Cube of Truth.
Yeah.
Which, after thinking about it, I realized that's a square of truth, not a cube of truth.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
But, so why did you choose, you know, I mean, I see the masks are different.
Yeah.
Other than that, is it all the same? Or did you make choices, you know, and why did you choose that? I think that's, actually I can answer that.
Well,
I think it's more friendly, it's
yeah.
humorous, potentially humorous, those masks.
Right.
You know, it's more
Yeah.
inviting than the Anonymous for the Voiceless masks.
Yeah. I want to be clear, I did not found We the Free. We the Free is an international organization, and I'm the founder of the local DC chapter, but most of these decisions were made much higher up. But yeah, absolutely. In my experience with AV, a lot of people are weirded out by the masks that they use. And we do want to draw people in, but I don't know that weirding them out is necessarily the reaction we want.
Are there other differences besides the masks?
Yeah, so the biggest differences are that AV doesn't have anything like the movie challenge. And also, We the Free allows people to track their impact. And AV doesn't have anything like that.
In the card, do you want to talk about how the cards are a little different? Like, obviously.
Yeah. So AV doesn't provide any standardized cards, but the card that we were using had like 20 different things on it. And it's like, if you want to learn about, you want to watch Dominion, go here. You want to learn about nutrition, go here. You want to find good restaurants, go here. Like, there were just a million different things. Mm-hmm. And I really like that the cards that We the Free uses have one URL. And you go there and it's a one-stop shop. Like, I think that's really cool. Yeah.
And what is the screen, the movie screen, is that a laptop or a tablet?
So for the diamonds or for the movie challenges?
No, the diamond. You said you need more of those.
Yeah, so I mean, technically it can be whatever we want, but yeah, what we have now are just like regular TVs, I don't know, 20 inches, 27 inches, something around there, and we have harnesses to hold them. But yeah, it's helpful for them to be a little bit bigger.
And you said you want more of those. What do they cost?
I haven't looked into it. But if you're willing to help out financially, like, let's have a conversation. Because
I am. That's why I asked.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So, so We the Free does actually provide financial support for things like equipment and food. So, if you are able to make a donation to We the Free, then that will enable them to pay for any chapter to buy equipment or food. And that would be really awesome. Yeah. You want to?
Yeah, similar question. Like, for the people in the audience, what support are you looking for WTF?
Yeah.
I think what we need the most is for people to participate in events. That is the number one most important thing. And I have not yet scheduled the first event. I'm waiting for some stuff to come in the mail. But when it does, I really want to make this happen. And I'm going to ask you all to be enthusiastic outreachers and diamond teams and ushers and all that.
Besides the Facebook group, how else can you, like, how can you be, like, aware of, like, what's going on with WTF?
Are you in our actions chat?
Yeah, on the Signal chat?
Yes, on Signal. Yeah. Yeah, I will always announce it there.
They'll also be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to see the other 2 3-minute. It was the general. We saw a movie for the general audience.
Yeah.
And then there's one for vegetarians, one for children. I'd like to see those.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if everybody else wants to see them, but maybe maybe after the questions, that'd be great.
3 movies, right?
Yeah. .wtf. Yeah.
The vegetarian one, that's also graphic, I would imagine.
Yeah. The child one is not. Actually, it's not on 3movies.wtf. I think you have to go to the organizer site to get those. But.
One. I heard it was like is it like an animated thing or something?
Yeah, it's so Melanie Joy has some videos about carnism, and it's like cut from those.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, it's animated.
So I just remember that because I went to a movie challenge at the New York Convergence in
Yeah.
May.
Yeah. Anything else?
Do you have any summary stats from the right? Because individual activists can get statistics about
Right.
how they're doing. Do you have median activists how they're doing this sort of stuff?
I don't know, but I can ask. I mean, obviously, everything is tracked. So when you register your code, you register yourself as being a member of the Washington, D.C. chapter. And so they have all this information. Now, the extent to which they share it, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I have a question about the ask for nothing less than veganism
Yeah.
point. What if somebody is yeah, factory farming is terrible. I don't want to eat factory farmed food, but I'm fine with eating other animal products. What would you say to that?
I guess what I usually say is something like, so let's imagine that you do find a farm where the animals live happy lives until the day that they are slaughtered. If you were one of those animals, would you want to be slaughtered? I think framing a lot of these responses in terms of the animal's experience can be especially effective. Yeah?
Oh, for that, I don't know, I think there's 2 ways to do it. One of them is probably less good, philosophically, but the first is to emphasize, I emphasize the slaughter, they all go to the same slaughterhouses. The slaughterhouse is extremely traumatic, so I don't think that's justified even if they have the best life ever. Also, their life is shorter than it would be.
Right.
By a lot. And also, when I actually went vegan, I wasn't against eating animals. I was against factory farming, but when I saw that 99% of the meat in commercial meat in the US is from factory farms, I was well, it's going to be way too much effort for me to try to find meat that's not from a factory farm, and even the ones that claim to be ethical are actually not ethical. So the most easy thing for me to do is just not eat any animal products. So that was how I actually got vegan. But I was it's just the easiest way to make sure I'm not buying from factory farms. But then I was then after a couple months, I was actually, I think that's just wrong to eat animals at all.
Right, yeah, and it's important what you did about framing it as your own personal story. Because again, when you're telling your own story, nobody can challenge that, right? You could also bring up, for example, that 99% of meat that's sold in this country comes from factory farms. Maybe you could frame some of that response in terms of questions. You could ask things like, how might you verify that these companies are living up to their promises? Things like that. Yeah?
I guess you can also ask them what is your opinion on, if a human has a happy life and then their life ends, does it make it less upsetting than if they had a terrible life and then their life?
Yeah.
If you want to get
a little more philosophical, yeah. Yeah.
What are the main hesitations from already vegans that are not activists getting involved in activism?
Honestly, I mean, maybe they'll say they don't really have time, but honestly, most of the time they just say, okay, thank you. And, I'll look into it. Yeah.
I actually have a friend who's vegan but not an activist, and it's literally just because she thinks it's cringy. People don't want to be associated with PETA and animal rights activists because of the social stigma of it. So I think it's kind of hard to convince people out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing that we're going to do a little differently now compared to what we used to do is, I don't know if you saw on the card for vegans, I'm still working on the design, but I want it to point to the URL for this meetup. And the reason for that is that you know, exactly like you said, a lot of people can be intimidated just going straight to a protest. And I think that if they come here first, like, they can meet the community, and we can sort of invite them in then to continue to do other kinds of activism.
We got time for like one more. We can have a conversation later. We can keep the conversation going after, but we gotta start. Does anyone have a final question? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.